revised criteria for classification of non-company entities for applicability of accounting standards. In the 433rd Council meeting held during August 13th to August 15th, 2024, the Council has taken a decision that there will be a revision in the criteria for classification of non-corporate entities for applicability of accounting standards. Now, this revision or the new notification will be effective for financial statements commencing from 1st of April 2024. Means for financial statements 24-25 onwards, this revised criteria will be applicable. As per the revised criteria, now the non-corporate entities are broadly classified into two categories. One is large entities and the second category is MSMEs, means micro, small and medium enterprises. Now, for a non-corporate entity to be classified as a MSME, certain conditions are to be satisfied. There are 5 conditions in total. All these 5 conditions are to be satisfied and such a non-corporate entity shall be considered as a MSME, right? Because the applicability of accounting standards is dependent upon this classification. Now, what is the first condition? The entity must not have securities listed or in the process of listing in a recognized stock exchange. First condition. Now, what is the second condition? The entity should not be a bank or a financial institution or an insurance company. And in the preceding year, the turnover should not exceed 250 crores, and in the preceding years, the outstanding borrowings should not exceed 50 crores of rupees, and such a non-corporate entity should not be a subsidiary of a non-MSME entity. A holding or a subsidiary of a, it should not be a holding or a subsidiary of a non-MSME entity. These are the 5 conditions. If all these 5 conditions are satisfied, the entity will be classified as an MSME. Then what do you mean by a large entity? A large entity is a non-corporate entity which is not an MSME, which is not an MSME. Now previously, under the previous criteria for classification, the entities, non-corporate entities were classified into level 1, 2, 3, 4. Level 1 used to be large entities, 2, 3, 4 are SMEs. The term used in that criteria is small and medium enterprises. But now, in the revised criteria for classification, the terminology used is MSME, means micro, small and medium enterprise, right? Unlike a previous classification, we don't have 4 levels, we have only 2 levels. Level 1 large entity, 2, 3, 4 are merged into MSMEs. You don't now call as SME, but you will call it as MSME. Now, what is the applicability of accounting standards by an entity's classification? Now, if the entity happens to be a large entity, then full accounting standards are to be followed. Also, all disclosure requirements are to be followed without there being any exemptions. But if you happen to be a MSME, if you happen to be a MSME, then you will have certain specific exemptions as well as there will be certain permission of simplified disclosures, means you will have certain reduced disclosure requirements. Next, now this announcement which has come in the month of August 2024, it will supersede the previous announcement classifying the non-corporate entities. The previous announcement came in March 2021. Now this new announcement will supersede the old announcement. Also, this classification criteria and applicability of accounting standards will not be applicable in respect of those entities because of statutory requirements which are required to comply with the Ind AS or AS. For those non-corporate entities, this announcement or this criteria is not applicable. Now, the terminology change, etc., will be dealt in the AS accounting standards, which will be published in the updated Compendium of Accounting Standards. Because previously in accounting standards the term SME was used, but now the term MSME is replaced. Now let's come to the disclosure requirements for MSMEs. Now these MSMEs, by virtue of this announcement or criteria for classification, will have certain specific exemptions and also certain relaxations in the disclosures. If this MSME non-corporate entity avails any such exemptions or avails any such relaxations in the disclosure requirements, it should include in a note to its financial statements that it is having an MSME status. Point number one. Also, any exemptions or relaxations which have been availed by the MSME should be documented in the notes on account. And also you have to give a note which will confirm that the entity has complied with the applicable accounting standards for MSME. A note has to be given. And also, because of this disclosure, there will be a transparency with regard to the accounting framework which the entity has adopted in preparation and presentation of its financial statements. Now let us say sometimes what will happen is the previously classified as a MSME, the entity may become now a large entity, right? Maybe its turnover has exceeded 250 crores of rupees, or its outstanding borrowings have exceeded 50 crores of rupees. One of the condition is not satisfied, thereby it ceases to be an MSME. Now, when a MSME no longer qualifies for exemption, then the new standards and all standards apply immediately, right? Now, previously last year it was an MSME. It has a certain disclosure exemptions, or it has a certain exemptions of accounting standards. But now when it has become large, everything is applicable to it. But a facility is given that the previous figures need not be revised because of a change in the status from MSME to large. And also the entity should disclose that previously it was an MSME and it has utilized certain exemptions in the financial statements. It should be given by way of a note. And also this notes must explicitly state that the previous figures remain unrevised due to the status change. So because you have become from a MSME to a large, all the standards are applicable for the current year onwards, but you need not modify the previous figures, right? But to this effect, a note has to be given that previous figures were not changed, and also that you were previously an MSME and you have availed certain exemptions. That should be clearly stated. Now come to the reverse case. Last year it was a large entity. Now this year it becomes an MSME because it has satisfied all the 5 conditions. Wait a minute. Don't think that it will be eligible to get the exemptions. No, there is a cooling period of 2 years. There is a cooling period of 2 years. So even though you have become an MSME this year, last year you were a large entity, now you are an MSME, but the exemptions, relaxations, etc. available to an MSME won't be applicable to you today itself. You have to wait for 2 more years. 2 more years your status will be large and you have to comply with the full accounting standards and full disclosure requirements. Only when you continue as an MSME for 2 years, then you will be eligible to take the exemptions or relaxations from the third year onwards. Now, why this rule has been introduced? This waiting period will ensure the stability in reporting framework and prevents entities from frequently switching between compliances. Because last year your turnover was at 255 crores, you are a large entity. Now it happened that you are 249 crores. But maybe in the next year again your turnover will increase and you may go to 260 crores. So switching between large to MSME, MSME to large, instead of that switching frequently, this rule states that once from large to MSME, you have transformed for 2 years. If you remain in the MSME, then only you will be eligible to take the exemptions and relaxations applicable for a MSME. Now, selective exemption disclosure requirements means that if you happen to be an MSME, you will have certain relaxations and exemptions. You can choose what exemption to avail and what exemption not to avail. There may be certain relaxations in the disclosure requirements. You may choose certain disclosures to be complied by you. You may choose certain other optional disclosures not to disclose in your financial statements in notes on accounts. So if you are choosing, then what this states is that you have to make the disclosures. So you should clearly identify which specific accounting standards received exemptions, and also a detailed notes must accompany statements listing each standard where relaxations were applied and where relaxations were not applied. Now, also the MSMEs have flexibility in applying accounting standards, but this privilege should be exercised responsibly. So you may choose to apply or adopt an accounting standard fully, though you have an exemption. Now, this entities can adopt specific exemptions while following the other standards in full. All partial exemptions must be clearly documented in the financial statements by way of notes to accounts. Now, why this has been introduced in this criteria means this selective compliance should not create misleading financial representation for users. So your financial statements should not mislead the users. So these disclosures have to be made where you have selectively availed the exemptions. Moving forward, let's understand the applicability of accounting standards to the non-company entities. Now we have dealt with the first part of our discussion, that is classification. Now, why this classification is made? In order to enforce the accounting standards on the non-corporate entities. Now, let's understand what accounting standards are applicable to large entities and what are the relaxations and exemptions available to a MSME. Now that we already understood whom do you mean by large entity and whom do you mean by a MSME. Now, what are all the accounting standards which are effective as on 1/4/2024. Now there are altogether 29 AS1 to AS29. We have the accounting standards which are applicable as on 1/4/2024. However, the actual count is only 27 because two standards have been withdrawn, and those standards are AS 6 and as well as AS 8. These two standards are withdrawn, though the number runs up to AS 29, but still the actual number of accounting standards applicable as on 1/4/2024 is 27, right? For a large non-corporate entities, the accounting standards are applicable in full without any exemption. Now, what are the specific disclosure relaxations or exemptions available to a MSME? So, in respect of an MSME, and mind you, where an MSME want to comply with all the accounting standards, it's up to them and they have to make a disclosure in their notes on accounts. Now, for all MSMEs, AS 3, AS 17, AS 20, AS 24 means cash flow statements, segmental reporting, EPS earning per share, discontinuing operations. These standards are not at all applicable in full to any MSME. That's point number one. Point number two, two more standards, AS 18 and AS 28. If the MSME's turnover does not exceed 50 crores in the preceding year, borrowings does not exceed 10 crore in the preceding year, for such MSMEs, and also such MSME is not a holding or subsidiary of a non any other MSME not covered above, means your turnover should be less than 50 crores, your borrowing should be less than 10 crores, and you should not be holding or subsidiary of any other MSME other than this type of MSMEs. If these three conditions are satisfied, then you have an exemption for AS 18 as well as AS 28, impairment of assets and related party disclosures. Now come to AS 14, and AS 14 is with regard to amalgamations, AS 27 is joint ventures. Friends, MSMEs are generally presumed to be exempt from these two standards, because these standards will be applicable to an MSME only if they engage in certain specific transactions, right? Rarely the MSMEs go for amalgamations or joint ventures. If they are into that, okay, well, it will be applicable. But most of the MSMEs don't engage in such type of transactions. Therefore, AS 14, AS 27 also safely they can leave. Now you come to AS 21, AS 23. AS 21 is consolidated financial statements. AS 23 is investments in associates. AS 27 we have already dealt with, joint ventures. Generally MSMEs don't indulge in those type of transactions. AS 25, interim reporting. These three standards also generally they may not be applicable to a non-corporate entity, because a non-corporate entity may not be mandated by any law to prepare a consolidated financial statements, or they may not be making investments because they may not be be into any transactions wherein they may have to prepare consolidated financial statements. So investments in associates may not also be applicable, and coming to interim financial reporting also they may not be applicable. So if you count generally the number of standards which may not be applicable, here we have 3, 21, 23, 25, then you have two standards 14, 27, 5, then you have 4 standards 3, 17, 20, 24, means 4 plus 5, 9 standards. And if this MSME borrowing is less than 10 crore and turnover is less than 50 crores, you have another 2 standards. So almost for an MSME whose turnover does not exceed 50 crores of rupees, borrowings does not exceed 10 crores of rupees, most of the cases maybe 11 standards will not be applicable to them. If the turnover is more than 50 crores, up to 250 crores, 9 standards will not be applicable. So what are all those standards we have already discussed. Now that we are through the standards which are not applicable at all to an MSME. Now we will come to the other standards which are applicable to MSME, but there are certain relaxations in respect of the balance 27 minus 11 or 27 minus 9. You have these balance standards, right? If you take 27 minus 11, it will be 16. In these 16 standards also, MSMEs will have certain relaxations. So what are those relaxations? You come to AS10, property, plant and equipment. Paragraph number 2087, you have a relaxation, right? And what is paragraph 87 of AS10? You may easily refer in the accounting standards, right? Now come to AS11. Generally, most of the MSMEs may not be entering into any transaction of a foreign currency. Maybe there may be certain small percentage of MSMEs who will be entering into transactions of a foreign currency, but maybe in most of the cases they may not be entering into foreign exchange transaction. Then AS11 will also be not applicable in respect of that entity. Now let's say AS11 is applicable to them. In such a case, paragraph 44 need not be complied with, right? Now what is 44? You can very well refer. Now coming to AS15, employee benefits, paragraph 11 to 16, paragraph 46 and 139, paragraph 50 to 116, 117 to 123, paragraph 129 to 139. You have certain disclosure exemptions or certain relaxations in respect of certain paras of the AS15 employee benefits. Now coming to AS19 leases, you have certain disclosure relaxations given in para 22C, 22EF, 25ABE. Means you will get a relaxation in respect of reconciliation of gross investment with present value of minimum lease payments. You have a relaxation there. Also you have 38, 37AFG and 46BDE. So what are all these paragraphs? You can very well refer. Now come to this AS22, accounting for taxes on income. Now this for most of the cases this standard will be applicable, but what you have to understand is only current tax is applicable. Current tax is applicable. Deferred tax is not applicable to an MSME. Though your turnover is more than 50 crores and up to 250 crores. For those people also, for turnover of 0 to 250 crores, for borrowings 0 to 50 crores, deferred tax is not applicable to you, right? Only current tax is applicable. Means para 4.4 defines what is a current tax, and recognition, how it is to be recognized, the current tax is given in para 9, and how it is to be measured is given in para 20, and how it is to be disclosed is given in para 27 to 28. Only these are applicable, rest of the things are not applicable. But now when you are coming into this exemption, previously you are a large entity, you became MSME. For 2 years you are MSME, but still you will be considered as a large entity. Third year, come to third year. Previously you were disclosing the deferred tax. Now what happened? Because of your MSME status, deferred tax is not applicable to you, but deferred tax is appearing in your financial statements. What that deferred tax is to be done? You transfer it to the owner's capital. You transfer it to the owner's funds, right? That's what it has been stated in the transitional requirement, which is an important thing. And this AS22, what you have to keep in mind is deferred tax is not applicable to an MSME. Only current tax provisions, para 4.4, para 9, para 20, para 27, para 28 are alone applicable. Now come to intangible assets, AS26, you have exemptions of para 90 D4, 90 D3 and para 98, right? Now coming to impairment of assets, the MSME can use reasonable estimates instead of a present value technique, right? So you can use a reasonable estimate. Now, and also the in respect of AS 28, you have many relaxations with regard to the paragraphs of 121 and 123. There are certain relaxations in disclosures. You can go through in the this announcement with regard to revised classification for applicability of accounting standards for non-corporate entities. A link is provided in the description of this video. By clicking that link, you can download this announcement wherein you have all these relaxation items. Now coming to AS 29, provisions, contingent liabilities, contingent assets. Now these MSMEs are exempt from paragraph 66 and 67. You need not comply with the disclosure requirements as given in para 66 and 67. So friends, this is what the announcement of this revised criteria for classification of non-corporate entities, which has been issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. I tried to go through the entire announcement. Of course, the relaxations in respect of disclosures, etc., of the MSMEs, you may refer to those standards, to what are all the specific paragraphs which have been mentioned in this criteria announcement, and you can accordingly apply to your clientele. Hope this video and discussion is useful to you. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.